Daniel Carter stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber and felt the weight of 47 alien species staring down at him. The chamber was massive and circular, with seats rising up in layers like an ancient amphitheater. Each delegate sat in their designated area, and most of them looked bored. Some looked amused. None of them looked concerned. Daniel had been making the same request for 3 months now, and each time the answer was the same. The Vrexian delegate leaned forward in his seat. His insect-like body clicked and chittered as he spoke. The translator in Daniel's ear turned the sounds into words. "Ambassador Carter, you want us to send military forces to protect your colonies from the Krell Dominion. Is that correct?" Daniel nodded. 3 of our settlements have been attacked. 200,000 people are dead. We need help. The chamber erupted in sounds that his translator couldn't quite capture. Some species laughed. Others made noises that seemed dismissive. The Tarathi representative glowed with colors that shifted from blue to yellow. Daniel's translator called it amusement mixed with pity. "Human," the Tarathi said in a voice like wind chimes. "Your species joined the galactic community only 30 years ago. The Krell have been raiding systems for thousands of years. This is simply how things work in contested space." Daniel felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice level. "How things work? You're talking about mass murder." A floating jellyfish-like creature undulated, and what Daniel had learned was laughter. The Zifferon counselor spoke in bubbling tones. "Your people should not have settled so far from protected space. You lack the strength to defend such ambitious expansion. Perhaps this will teach humanity to know its place." Behind Daniel stood Commander Lisa Morgan. She wore her Earth Defense Force uniform with pride, and her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. She had served for 20 years, and hearing these aliens dismiss human lives so casually made her want to scream, but she stayed silent. This was Daniel's show. The High Chancellor raised one claw for silence. He was an old Vrexian whose shell bore scars from centuries of life. "Ambassador Carter, the Council has reviewed your request in multiple sessions. Our position remains unchanged. Humanity is too new to the galactic stage. Your technology is primitive. Your ships barely exceed light speed. Your weapons are simple projectile launchers. The Krell use quantum disruptors and singularity weapons. What could you possibly do against such power?" Daniel took a slow breath. He had been authorized by Earth Command to make one final plea. But looking around at the faces that ranged from amused to bored to outright hostile, he knew it would be pointless. These species had lived for millions of years. They saw humanity as children playing at being adults. They would never take Earth seriously. "I see," Daniel said quietly. "Then humanity will defend itself." The laughter that followed echoed through the chamber. Even species that rarely showed emotion seemed to find this funny. The High Chancellor's mandibles spread wide in what passed for a smile among his kind. "By all means, Ambassador," the Chancellor said. "Please do defend yourselves against the Krell. We shall observe with great interest. Perhaps your species will learn a valuable lesson about humility and proper placement in the galactic order." More laughter followed. Daniel heard a Cathrak delegate rumble something that his translator rendered as, "The young ones always learn the hard way." A Tarathi pulsed with colors that meant condescension. The Zifferon counselor actually bounced in its containment field with what could only be glee. Daniel turned and walked toward the exit. Lisa fell into step beside him. They could still hear the laughter as the chamber doors closed behind them. Neither of them spoke until they were inside their shuttle and the doors had sealed. The shuttle was Earth technology and completely secure from any outside listening devices. "Permission to speak freely, Ambassador?" Lisa asked. "Granted, Commander." "Those arrogant bastards have no idea what's coming, do they?" Daniel allowed himself a small smile. It was the first time his face had shown any emotion in hours. "No, Commander. They really don't." He pulled out his secure communicator. The device was small and black and used quantum encryption that no Council species had ever seen before. He typed a simple message to Earth Command. "Request denied. Proceed to Phase 2. The response came back in less than 5 seconds. "Acknowledged. Unleashing Protocol Omega." Lisa watched Daniel's face as he read the response. "It's really happening then?" "We're going to show them." "Not just show them," Daniel said. "We're going to make them understand that humanity didn't ask for help because we're weak. We asked because we believed in cooperation. We believed the Council actually meant something when they talked about mutual defense and protecting all member species. And now, Now they'll learn what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. Daniel looked out the viewport at the stars streaming past. The council thinks they know everything because they're old. They think their way is the only way because it's worked for millions of years. But they forgot something important. What's that? That humanity didn't reach the stars by following someone else's rules. We did it by making our own. Daniel's smile grew colder. For 30 years we've played their game. We showed them our patrol fleet and let them think that was everything we had. We smiled and nodded and acted like grateful children learning from wise elders. Lisa felt a surge of pride. She had been part of the deception from the beginning. Every Earth Defense Force officer had been. They had shown the Council exactly what the Council expected to see. Simple ships with conventional weapons. Nothing threatening. Nothing that would make the ancient species nervous. What they hadn't shown was the construction happening in the Kuiper Belt. The shipyards hidden behind sensor screens and buried in asteroids. The weapons development that had taken every lesson humanity learned from centuries of warfare and applied it to space combat. The fleet that officially didn't exist. How long until the Krell reached New Montana? Daniel asked. Lisa checked her datapad. 16 hours. Admiral Henderson is already moving the first fleet into position. And the Council? They have no idea. As far as their sensors know, that entire sector is empty except for the colony itself. Daniel nodded. New Montana was home to 8 million people. Most of them were farmers and miners. They had gone to the frontier to build new lives. They had dreamed of something better. And the Krell saw them as prey. The Council saw them as acceptable losses in the grand scheme of galactic politics. Earth saw them as citizens worth defending. Send a message to Admiral Henderson, Daniel said. Tell him the Council has made their position clear. He is authorized to use any means necessary to protect our people. No restrictions. No holding back. Show them everything. Lisa's fingers flew across her datapad. Message sent. Sir, do you think the Council will retaliate when they find out we've been hiding our true capabilities? Let them try. Daniel's voice was hard as steel. We gave them every chance to do the right thing. We asked for help. We followed their procedures. We respected their authority. And they laughed at us while our people died. The shuttle dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the diplomatic station where Earth maintained its embassy. As they approached the docking bay, Daniel could see other alien ships coming and going. Representatives from species that thought they ruled the galaxy, species that had never been told no, species that had never faced a real challenge to their power. That was about to change. Commander, when we dock, I want you to send a message to all Earth colonies. Tell them help is coming. Tell them to hold on for just a few more hours. And tell them that humanity never abandons its own. Yes, sir. Lisa paused. Sir, after this, there's no going back. Everything changes. Everything already changed, Daniel said. The moment the Council chose politics over lives. The moment they decided we weren't worth protecting. They just don't know it yet. The shuttle docked with a soft thunk. As Daniel and Lisa disembarked, they passed a group of Rexian diplomats. The aliens were still chittering and clicking in what his translator rendered as jokes about human weakness, about how the primitive species would learn their lesson, about how amusing it would be to watch. Daniel kept walking. Let them laugh. Let them mock. Let them believe humanity was weak and helpless. In 16 hours they would learn the truth. And the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Paul Henderson stood on the bridge of the ESS Valiant and watched through the viewport as the hidden shipyard came alive around them. For 30 years this moment had been planned. For 30 years humanity had played a careful game of deception. They had smiled at the Council and showed them simple patrol ships. They had let the older species believe they understood Earth's full military power. It had been the greatest magic trick in human history, and now it was time for the reveal. Status report, Paul said in a calm voice. Lieutenant Jake Morrison looked up from his console. The young officer had a grin on his face that he was barely managing to suppress. All stealth fields are holding at maximum efficiency, Admiral. Council sensors show this entire sector as empty space. No ships detected, and the shipyard status? All 300 vessels are coming online now, sir. Captain Nicole Hayes spoke from the tactical station. Her fingers danced across holographic controls. The Ghost Fleet is waking up. Paul nodded and continued watching the viewport. Running lights began flickering to life across ships that officially had never been built. Each vessel had been constructed in secret over decades. Engineers and shipbuilders had worked in hidden facilities scattered throughout the Kuiper Belt. Materials had been gathered from asteroids. Power systems had been tested in remote areas of the solar system where no Council sensors could detect them. And now 300 warships that shouldn't exist were preparing for their first real mission. Admiral, we're receiving telemetry from our listening posts near the outer colonies. Lieutenant Commander Greg Phillips reported. The Krell are gathering their forces. Current fleet strength is estimated at 1,200 vessels. Time until they reach New Montana? 16 hours, sir. Paul studied the tactical display that showed the Krell fleet moving through space like a swarm of locusts. 1,200 ships, each one armed with weapons that the Council considered standard. Quantum disruptors that could tear through armor, singularity cannons that created miniature black holes, energy shields that could absorb massive amounts of damage. The Krell had been using these weapons to terrorize the frontier for thousands of years. They had never faced Earth's military. Begin fleet mobilization, Paul commanded. All ships are weapons-free. Authorization code Henderson Omega 77 Alpha. Throughout the hidden shipyard, crews scrambled to their stations. Reactor cores that had been idling at low power ramped up to full capacity. Weapons systems that had only been tested in simulations went live. Engines that could push these ships faster than anything the Council had ever seen began their startup sequences. The ESS Valiant herself was a perfect example of human military philosophy. On paper, she was smaller than most Council dreadnoughts. Her armor was thinner. Her main weapons were kinetic railguns instead of exotic energy beams. To any Council engineer, she would look primitive and underpowered. But those engineers would be making a fatal mistake. They would be judging the Valiant by their own standards instead of understanding what made human engineering different. Sir, priority transmission from Earth Command, Communications Officer Betty Wells announced. Put it through. Fleet Admiral Kevin Stone appeared on the main screen. His weathered face showed the weight of command. Paul, the President has given final authorization. You are cleared to use any and all means necessary to protect our colonies. Show the galaxy what humanity can do when we stop playing nice. Understood, sir. We won't let you down. I know you won't. Give them hell, Paul. Earth out. The transmission ended and Paul turned to face his bridge crew. He saw determination on every face. These men and women had trained for this moment. They had practiced formations and tactics that no Council species would expect. They had studied every scrap of intelligence about Krell weapons and defenses. And they were ready. All hands, this is Admiral Henderson, Paul announced over the ship-wide communications channel. For 30 years we've held back. We've listened to species that measure their lifespans in centuries tell us we're too young to matter. We've smiled while they treated us like children. We've watched them dismiss our concerns and laugh at our requests for help. He paused and let his words sink in. Throughout the ship. They think we're primitive because we use kinetic weapons instead of energy beams. They think we're weak because we haven't conquered half the galaxy. They think we're helpless because we asked for their help instead of handling things ourselves. Through the viewport, the fleet was forming up into attack formations. 300 ships moved with precision that came from endless drilling and practice. But humanity didn't claw its way to the top of Earth's food chain by being weak. We didn't split the atom and reach the stars by being primitive. We didn't build a civilization from nothing by being helpless. We did it by being the most stubborn, innovative, and adaptable species our world had ever seen. Paul's voice grew harder. The Krell are coming to slaughter 8 million civilians. They expect no resistance. They expect us to run or beg or die quietly, and the Council expects us to fail. They're all about to learn that expecting things from humanity is a very dangerous game. He gripped the railing in front of his command chair. The Krell think they're hunting sheep. Let's show these bastards what happens when the sheep turn out to be wolves. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump to New Montana. Time to go to work. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Helmsman Lieutenant Chris Palmer called out vectors and coordinates. Navigator Ensign Karen White confirmed the jump calculations. Weapons Officer Commander Steve Brooks armed every railgun and missile system on the ship. All ships report ready for jump. Jake announced, "Execute jump," Paul ordered. Space twisted and the ESS Valiant leapt forward faster than light. Behind her, 299 other ships did the same. The hidden fleet vanished from the Kuiper Belt shipyard in perfect synchronization. For a moment, the secret facility was empty and silent. Then the maintenance crews emerged from their stations and began preparing for the fleet's return. They didn't know if all 300 ships would come back. War was unpredictable, but they knew that humanity had finally stopped hiding. And that was worth celebrating regardless of the outcome. Inside the hyperspace tunnel, the Valiant's crew made final preparations. Nicole ran diagnostics on every weapon system. Greg coordinated with the other ships to ensure perfect formation when they arrived. Betty monitored all communication channels for any sign the Krell had detected them. Paul sat in his command chair and thought about the 8 million people on New Montana. Most of them had no military training. They were farmers growing crops in alien soil, miners extracting resources from asteroids, teachers educating children, shopkeepers and doctors and engineers and artists, normal people living normal lives on the frontier. The Krell saw them as targets. The Council saw them as acceptable casualties. Earth saw them as citizens. 60 seconds to emergence, Chris announced. All stations report ready, Jake added. Paul felt a familiar calm settle over him. This was what he had trained for his entire career. This was why humanity had built a fleet in secret. This was the moment when Earth stopped asking for permission and started taking action. Weapons free upon emergence, Paul ordered. Execute pattern Delta 7. We're going to hit them hard and fast. Show them that underestimating humanity was the last mistake they'll ever make. Pattern Delta 7 confirmed, Nicole said. Her fingers moved across her controls with practiced ease. All ships acknowledge. 10 seconds, Chris counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Emergence. Space snapped back into normal physics and the ESS Valiant dropped out of hyperspace. Around her, 299 other ships emerged in perfect formation, and spread out before them was the Krell Armada. 1,200 ships gathered around New Montana like vultures around a dying animal. Paul smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. All ships, he said calmly. Engage. 300 human warships that officially didn't exist opened fire. Railguns accelerated projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. Missile pods launched weapons with guidance systems that could think for themselves. Electronic warfare suites broadcast signals designed to crash Krell targeting computers. The Battle of New Montana had begun. And the Krell were about to learn that humanity had been studying warfare for their entire history, not the ritualized combat of ancient species, not the formal battles between council fleets. Real warfare. Brutal, efficient, and utterly without mercy for those who threatened innocence. The galaxy was about to receive an education in human military doctrine, and class was now in session. Fleet Master Krellnack stood on the command deck of his flagship Devourer of Hope, and felt satisfaction flowing through his body. Below him, the human colony of New Montana hung in space like ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. 1,200 Krell warships surrounded the planet in a formation that had brought terror to countless worlds over thousands of years. This would be another easy victory, another lesson to species that dared settle in space the Krell considered theirs. Scan for defensive systems. Krellnax ordered in his species' guttural language. His tactical officer manipulated controls with clawed hands. Minimal orbital platforms detected, Fleetmaster. No significant military presence. No capital ships. The humans appear to have abandoned their colonists. Krellnax's mandibles spread wide in pleasure. This was how it always went. The younger species settled where they shouldn't. The Krell came to teach them the price of such arrogance. And the Great Galactic Council did nothing because they understood that might made right in the galaxy. The Krell had might. Humans did not. Excellent, Krellnax said. Charge all weapon systems. We will begin bombardment of the primary settlements. Let this colony serve as an example to others who think they can settle in contested space without consequence. Throughout the Krell fleet, quantum disruptors hummed to life. Singularity cannons began generating the miniature black holes they would hurl at the planet's surface. Energy shields powered up to maximum. The Krell didn't expect any resistance, but they were not foolish. They protected themselves as they had for millennia. Then, space itself tore open. 300 human vessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, and the entire tactical situation changed in an instant. Krellnack stared at his display screens in shock. Where had these ships come from? They weren't in any council registry. Their energy signatures matched nothing in the Krell database. And they were moving with a coordination that seemed impossible for such a young species. What is this? Krellnack snarled. Where did these vessels come from? All ships combat formation. Prepare to engage. The Krell fleet began shifting from bombardment positions to battle deployment. But they moved according to tactics that were thousands of years old. Predictable tactics. Tactics that assumed their enemies would fight the same way. Aboard the ESS Valiant, Admiral Paul Henderson watched the Krell fleet with cold calculation. All ships execute Pattern Delta 7. Let's show them how Earth does war. The human fleet didn't charge forward in a single mass like the Krell expected. Instead, they scattered into dozens of smaller groups. Each group moved independently but with perfect coordination. They didn't form traditional battle lines. They flowed through space like schools of fish or flocks of birds, natural patterns that worked because they were unpredictable and adaptable. "Sir, the Krell are attempting to hail us," Jake reported. "Put them through." Krellnax's face appeared on the main screen. His species was insectoid with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked when he spoke. "You are interfering in Krell territory, humans. Your Galactic Council will hear of this aggression. You are violating established protocols." Paul's smile was colder than deep space. "The Council made their position very clear, Fleetmaster. They won't help us. Which means all those nice treaties about proportional response and regulated warfare don't apply anymore." He leaned forward in his command chair. "Welcome to a human war. You're not going to enjoy it." Paul cut the transmission and turned to Nicole. "Weapons free. Show them what we've been working on." The ESS Valiant's railguns fired first. Unlike the energy weapons that Council species favored, these were pure kinetic weapons. Solid slugs of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds by powerful magnetic fields. They moved at a significant fraction of light speed, and when they hit their targets, the result was devastating. The first Krell cruiser simply ceased to exist. One moment it was a functioning warship. The next moment it was expanding clouds of debris and vapor. The kinetic energy of the railgun slugs had been too much for its shields and armor to handle. Energy shields were designed to dissipate energy weapons. They did almost nothing against solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. "Sir, the Krell are returning fire," Jake announced. "Evasive pattern, Charlie. Point defense to maximum." The Krell's quantum disruptors lanced through space. These weapons could tear through most Council ships with ease. They created focused beams of exotic particles that disrupted matter at the molecular level. But the ESS Valiant twisted and spun through space with agility that shouldn't have been possible for a ship her size. Human engineers had studied everything from fighter jets to dolphins, to design movement systems that prioritized maneuverability over size and power. The few shots that did connect were met by defensive systems that fired thousands of times per second. Point defense lasers tracked incoming fire with computer precision and fragmented it before it could reach the hull. The damage that got through was minimal. "All weapon systems firing," Nicole reported. "Target priority on their capital ships. Missile pods launching." Throughout space, the human fleet demonstrated 30 years of hidden innovation. Missiles streaked toward Krell vessels, but these weren't dumb projectiles. Each one had computer systems that could think and adapt. They identified targets and prioritized based on threat level. They communicated with each other to avoid wasting shots on already doomed enemies. And they had electronic warfare packages that crashed Krell targeting systems with viruses and malware. "Helm, bring us about," Paul ordered. "Target their flagship. Cut the head off the snake." The Valiant dove through the chaos of battle like a predator through prey. Her railgun spoke again and again. Each shot was precisely calculated by computers that could process millions of variables per second. Krell ships that had terrorized the frontier for millennia were being torn apart by weapons the Council had called primitive. Greg watched his tactical display with something close to awe. "Admiral, our fleet is operating at 93% efficiency. The Krell are down to 68% and falling fast." "They're not adapting," Nicole observed. "They keep trying the same tactics," Paul nodded. It was the weakness of ancient species. They had fought the same way for so long they couldn't imagine doing it differently. The Krell expected enemies to form battle lines and trade shots until one side broke. They expected shields to matter and armor to hold. They expected warfare to follow rules and patterns. Humanity had spent 10,000 years learning that war had no rules. "Only survivors and casualties. They're breaking formation," Nicole reported. "Multiple ships attempting to retreat." "Negative," Paul said flatly. "Pattern Omega. No survivors for ships that fired on our colonies. Any vessel that surrenders and powers down weapons gets accepted. Otherwise, destroy them all." What followed would be recorded in galactic history as a turning point. The Krell had come expecting to slaughter civilians. Instead, they found themselves in a knife fight with a species that had perfected the art of violence through millennia of practice. Human ships moved in ways that seemed to defy physics. Human weapons hit with precision that seemed impossible, and human tactics adapted and evolved in real time as the battle progressed. A group of Krell destroyers tried to overwhelm a single human frigate with numerical superiority. The frigate launched a spread of missiles that split into dozens of submunitions. Each submunition tracked a different target. Within 90 seconds, all 5 Krell destroyers were drifting wrecks. A Krell dreadnought tried to use its superior firepower to simply overpower human defenses through volume of fire. 3 human cruisers converged on it from different angles and hit it with synchronized railgun strikes. The dreadnought's shields collapsed and its hull came apart like paper. The Devourer of Hope tried to rally the Krell fleet around itself. Admiral Henderson personally led a strike force of 20 ships against it. The human vessels moved like dancers, weaving through defensive fire that would have destroyed any council ship. Their railguns hammered the flagship from every angle. Their missiles found weak points in its armor and exploited them ruthlessly. Krellnax watched his command displays in horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed. How was this possible? Humans were primitive. Humans were weak. Humans were supposed to be easy prey, but these ships fought with a ferocity and intelligence he had never encountered. They didn't just fight to win. They fought to annihilate. All ships surrender, Krellnax broadcast. Power down weapons. Request mercy. Throughout the remaining Krell fleet, ships began shutting down their weapons and shields. It was a humiliating admission of defeat, but it was better than death. In 47 minutes, the battle was over. Of 1,200 Krell vessels, 372 had surrendered. The rest were debris fields. Human casualties were minimal. 15 ships damaged, 2 destroyed. 143 crew members killed in action. As the last Krell ship powered down its weapons, Paul sat back in his command chair. Get me a channel to all Krell vessels. When the connection was established, he addressed them with the same cold calm he had maintained throughout the battle. This message is for the Krell Dominion, and anyone else listening. You attacked our civilians. You murdered our people. When we asked the Council for help, they laughed at us. He paused to let that sink in. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in its 1,000-year history. Every delegate had arrived within hours of receiving the transmission from New Montana. The chamber that usually echoed with bored voices now crackled with tension that needed no translator to understand. Ambassador Daniel Carter stood in the center of the room, and this time nobody was laughing. The High Chancellor's voice shook with barely controlled fury. You deceived us, Ambassador Carter. You hid your true military capabilities. You built an entire fleet in secret while pretending to be weak and helpless. Daniel met the old Vrexian's gaze without flinching. We didn't deceive anyone. You saw our patrol fleet and assumed that was everything. You made that assumption based on your own arrogance. We never claimed those were our only ships. You simply never asked. The Tarathi representative pulsed angry crimson colors. You violated every treaty regarding proportional response. You massacred the Krell fleet. 800 ships destroyed. This is unprecedented aggression. We defended our colony, Daniel replied in a voice like ice. After you refused to help us. Let me be very clear about something. The Krell came to murder 8 million civilians. We stopped them. If you want to call that a massacre, fine. But I call it justice. Commander Lisa Morgan stepped forward and activated a holographic display. Battle footage from New Montana filled the air above the chamber floor. The delegates watched as Krell ships prepared to bombard the planet. Then the human fleet arrived. The battle played out in fast forward. The systematic destruction of the Krell armada. The acceptance of surrenders. The final message from Admiral Henderson. For the record, Lisa said clearly, we broadcast surrender terms before engaging. We accepted every Krell vessel that powered down weapons. 372 ships surrendered and their crews are alive and unharmed in our custody. The 828 that didn't surrender chose to keep fighting, Daniel added. That's their choice, not ours. We gave them every chance to stand down. The Zifferan counselor undulated with agitation. You have destabilized the entire sector. The Krell Dominion will retaliate with everything they have. This will lead to full-scale war. Let them come, Daniel said quietly. But they should know something. The fleet at New Montana was our first fleet. We have 4 more just like it, and all of them are ready to defend human space. The chamber exploded in chaos. Delegates from dozens of species began shouting over each other. The translators created a wall of noise that was physically painful to hear. Some species were demanding humanity be expelled from the council. Others were calling for sanctions. A few were simply staring in shock at the realization that they had completely misunderstood Earth's capabilities. The High Chancellor slammed his claw down repeatedly until order was restored. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "Are you threatening this council, Ambassador Carter?" "No," Daniel said. "I'm telling you the truth that you should have figured out a long time ago. Humanity didn't join the Galactic Council because we needed your protection. We joined because we believed in cooperation. We believed in working together. We believed in building something better than endless conflict." He looked around the chamber. "But you treated us like ignorant children. You dismissed our concerns. You laughed when we asked for help. You let 200,000 of our people die while you debated and delayed. So here's the new reality. Humanity will defend itself. We will protect our interests. And we will show the same level of respect to council authority that you showed to our dying civilians. You cannot simply ignore council regulations." The Vrexian delegate protested. "Watch us," Lisa said flatly. Daniel pulled out a data tablet. "We're transmitting to all council members a full catalog of Earth's military capabilities. Ships, weapons, defensive systems, all of it. No more secrets. And we're also transmitting recordings of every single session where we requested help and were denied." He held up the tablet so everyone could see it. "Let every species in the council see exactly what happened. Let them judge whether we're the aggressors or whether we're simply a young species that learned a very hard lesson about galactic politics." The High Chancellor seemed to deflate slightly. His ancient carapace looked suddenly fragile. "What is it you want, Ambassador Carter? First, a formal apology to the families of the 200,000 civilians who died while the council debated and delayed. That is impossible. The council does not apologize to individual member species." Daniel continued as if he hadn't been interrupted. "Second, a full investigation into why the council ignored multiple distress calls from our colonies. Third, humanity requests permission to operate independently in matters of military defense. We'll participate in council decisions. We'll share intelligence when appropriate. We'll cooperate in good faith. But we will never again ask permission to defend our own people." "You're describing a military power operating outside council authority," the Chancellor protested. "No," Daniel corrected. "We're describing exactly what the Vrexian Empire, the Tarathi Confederation, and at least a dozen other council members already do. You just never had a problem with it before because they were old enough and powerful enough that you couldn't push them around." He locked eyes with the High Chancellor. "Humanity is giving you a choice. Accept us as equal partners with the same rights and autonomy as any other major power. Or watch as we exercise those rights anyway and let the council try to stop us." The silence that followed was absolute. Every delegate in the chamber understood what was being offered. This wasn't a request. This wasn't a negotiation. This was humanity drawing a line and daring the council to cross it. Finally, the Cathrak delegate spoke. His deep rumbling voice cut through the tension. "Perhaps we have treated the humans unfairly." Several delegates turned to stare at him. The Cathrak were one of the oldest and most respected species in the council. Their words carried weight. "The Cathrak clans recognize humanity's right to self-defense," the delegate continued. "We also recognize that the human fleet at New Montana showed remarkable restraint. They could have destroyed all Krell vessels. They chose to accept surrenders. That speaks to honor, not aggression." Other delegates began murmuring. Daniel could see the political calculations happening in real time. The council was realizing they had made a serious miscalculation. Now they had to decide whether to adapt or face conflict with a species that had just proved it could fight. The High Chancellor spoke slowly. "The council will take your requests under advisement. There will be hearings, investigations, debates. These things take time." "Fine," Daniel said. "While you're debating, humanity will continue defending its interests. And Chancellor, one more thing." "What?" "The survivors of the Krell fleet are already talking. Word is spreading throughout the frontier about what happened at New Montana. Every species that's been victimized by raiders and pirates that the council was too busy to deal with is watching this very carefully." He let that hang in the air. "Humanity isn't asking for special treatment. We're asking for the same respect you give to everyone else." And if you can't provide that, then a lot of species are going to start asking why they need the council at all. Daniel turned and walked toward the exit. Lisa fell into step beside him. The chamber remained silent as they left. Not the mocking silence from before. This was the silence of species realizing their galaxy had fundamentally changed, and they hadn't seen it coming. Behind them, the Cathrak delegate turned to the High Chancellor. You should have helped them when they first asked. They were young, unproven. We couldn't know they had such capabilities. They were dying, the Cathrak rumbled. And you chose politics over lives. Now they have proven themselves the only way that matters in this galaxy, through strength. You created this situation by treating them with contempt. Now you must live with the consequences. The High Chancellor sat in his seat and felt the weight of his centuries pressing down on him. The Cathrak was right. The Council had assumed that age equaled wisdom and strength. They had treated humanity like children playing at being adults, and now those children had revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous, a species with nothing to lose and everything to prove. In the days that followed, the Council would debate and argue and try to reassert control, but everyone knew the truth. The galaxy's political order had shifted. Humanity had forced their way to the table not through patience or diplomacy, but through the oldest argument in the universe. Overwhelming force applied with precision and purpose, and every species in the Council was now doing calculations about what this meant for their own position and power. 3 months after the Battle of New Montana, the galaxy looked very different to those who understood what they were seeing. Admiral Paul Henderson stood on the observation deck of the ESS Valiant and watched as supply ships moved between the vessels of his fleet. The ghost fleet that had shocked the Krell and the Council was no longer hidden. 5 massive fleets now operated openly in human space, and nobody was laughing anymore. Admiral, you have a visitor, Jake announced over the intercom. Paul turned to see Ambassador Daniel Carter stepping onto the observation deck. The 2 men had worked together to plan humanity's reveal, and both carried the weight of decisions that had changed galactic politics forever. Daniel walked over to stand beside Paul at the viewport. The Council finally made their decision, Daniel said without preamble. And humanity has been granted what they're calling special defense status. Essentially, we have the same military autonomy as the major powers. We can defend our interests as we see fit with no prior approval needed. Paul allowed himself a slight smile. That's a start. It gets better, Daniel continued. 17 other species have requested similar status. They're citing humanity's case as precedent. The Council is having what my staff is calling an existential crisis about what this means for galactic governance. Do you think they've learned anything? Daniel considered the question. Some of them have. The Cathrak have proposed a complete restructuring of Council military protocols. The Tarathi are pushing for faster response times to distress calls. Even the Vrexians are admitting that maybe treating newer species like ignorant children wasn't the best long-term strategy. What about the Krell? Daniel's expression hardened. The Dominion has withdrawn from all contested border space. They've also begun internal discussions about actually joining the Council as legitimate members, rather than operating as raiders outside Council law. You think they're serious? I think they're terrified, Daniel said bluntly. They've been raiding the frontier for thousands of years because nobody could stop them. Now they know someone can. The smart ones are looking for a way to reform and save face. The stubborn ones will learn the hard way. They stood together watching the stars in comfortable silence. Paul had spent 30 years preparing for war. Now he was trying to figure out how to build peace from the ashes of that preparation. It was harder than he had expected. You know what the strangest part is? Daniel said after a while. Half the Council is furious with us. They think we're dangerous upstarts who need to be put back in our place. But the other half is grateful. Species that have been victimized for generations are asking how we did it, how we built a military that could stand against powers that have existed for millions of years. What do you tell them? The truth. That we didn't have millions of years of tradition telling us how warfare should work. We had to figure it out ourselves. And we figured it out by asking different questions. Why do ships need to be enormous? Why do weapons need to work a certain way? What if we tried something completely different? Paul nodded slowly. Innovation versus tradition. Exactly, Daniel agreed. The Council species are so old and so established that they stopped questioning their assumptions centuries ago. They have quantum disruptors because they've always had quantum disruptors. They fight in traditional formations because that's how it's been done for millennia. Nobody asks if there's a better way. And we came in with railguns and smart missiles and adaptive tactics. And scared the hell out of everyone, Daniel finished. He pulled out his tablet. I got a message from Earth this morning. The president wants to know if you'd be interested in heading up a new program. Military consultation with council species who want to modernize their forces. Paul raised an eyebrow. Teaching aliens how to fight better? That seems risky. The Secretary of Defense said exactly the same thing. But think about it. Right now we're the new scary thing in the galaxy. In a few decades there'll be something newer and scarier. Better to have allies who can actually fight alongside us than to stand alone. What did the president say? She said it was a terrible idea strategically and a great idea diplomatically, and she wasn't sure which mattered more. Daniel grinned. Then she authorized it anyway because she thinks it's the right thing to do. Paul laughed. It felt good to laugh after months of tension. That sounds exactly like her. All right, I'll consider it. But right now I've got 5 fleets to manage and new officers to train. How's recruitment going? We're turning away qualified applicants, Paul said. Turns out a lot of young people want to join the fleet that made the entire galaxy sit up and pay attention. We're being very selective, only taking the best. Good, we need the best. Daniel looked at his tablet again. I should get back to the embassy. I've got meetings with 3 different species who want to discuss trade agreements. Turns out everyone wants to be friends with the scary humans now. Politics, Paul said with mild distaste. Someone has to do it. You get to blow things up. I have to smile and negotiate. I think you got the harder job. Daniel left and Paul remained at the viewport. He thought about the Battle of New Montana and the 143 crew members who had died there. He thought about the 200,000 civilians who had died before humanity revealed its true strength. Too many lives lost because they had tried to play by rules that didn't protect them. But he also thought about the 8 million people on New Montana who had survived. About the colonies that were thriving now under the protection of fleets that everyone knew existed. About the message they had sent to anyone who thought humanity was easy prey. On Earth, President Helen Morrison sat in the Oval Office reviewing reports from across human space. New colonies were being established rapidly, now that people didn't fear being left defenseless. Trade was booming with species that had previously ignored the primitive humans. The council actually listened when Daniel spoke at sessions. Everything had changed, her secure communicator buzzed. Madam President, the High Chancellor is calling. Put him through. The Vrexian's face appeared on her screen. He looked older somehow, more tired. Madam President, I wanted to speak with you personally. I'm listening, Chancellor. The Council has formally approved your special defense status. But more than that, I wanted to offer a personal apology. He paused, clearly uncomfortable. We were wrong. About your species, about your capabilities, and about our responsibility to all Council members. The lives lost because of our inaction cannot be restored, but perhaps we can ensure it never happens again. Helen studied his face carefully. Was this genuine or just political maneuvering? She decided it didn't matter. The result was the same either way. Chancellor, I accept your apology. But understand something. Those weren't just statistics to us. They were people with names and families and dreams. My people will never forget that the Council failed them when it mattered most. I understand. Good. Because here's what happens next. Humanity will work with the Council in good faith. We'll share intelligence. We'll cooperate on mutual threats. We'll be the partners you should have let us be from the start. But we will never again put our safety in someone else's hands. We will never again trust that age equals wisdom. And we will never again mistake political expediency for justice. The Chancellor nodded slowly. That seems fair. One more thing. We're going to help other species who ask for it. Species that have been victimized the way we were. We're going to share what we've learned about defense and innovation, and the Council is going to let us do it without interference. That could change the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Yes, Helen said simply. It could. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe the galaxy needs some change. After the call ended, Helen looked out her window at the city beyond. Humanity had come so far from caves and stone tools. They had built civilizations and torn them down and built them again. They had fought wars and made peace and learned from both. And now they had brought those lessons to the stars. The Council had thought humanity's youth made them weak. They had forgotten that youth also meant adaptability. That being new meant not being bound by tradition. That inexperience could be an advantage when it meant approaching problems with fresh perspective. In bars and meeting halls across council space, stories about New Montana spread. Some versions painted humans as terrifying warriors who appeared from nowhere. Other versions focused on the tactical brilliance of the battle. A few emphasized the mercy shown to surrendering enemies. But all the stories agreed on one fundamental truth. The galaxy had changed the day humanity stopped pretending to be harmless. On colonies throughout human space, people looked up at night skies and saw not danger but protection. They saw the running lights of patrol ships that would actually defend them. They saw a government that valued their lives enough to fight when fighting was necessary. They saw a future where they could build and dream without fear. And in the hidden labs and shipyards where humanity continued to innovate, engineers and scientists worked on the next generation of technology. Because they understood something the Council was just learning, that standing still meant falling behind, that there was always a better way if you were willing to look for it, that the moment you stopped asking questions was the moment you